I've always loved animals, especially dogs. There's something about those small, fluffy creatures that always captured my heart. I loved playing with them, petting them, even engaging in games that, well, were more suitable for adults. And during one of those playful moments, I never thought the owner would walk in on us. But when he did, things went in a direction I never expected. He didn't just stand there in shock. No, he decided to help me. But how? That's a story I'm about to tell you. Let's start at the beginning. My name's Emily, and I'm 32. Married to Jake for 3 years, we live in a beautiful house on the edge of the city. It's the kind of house that most people dream of: quiet street, big backyard, even a dog. But behind the picture-perfect exterior, something's been missing. We're just two people going through the motions of life with no real connection. Jake is a good man. Hardworking, dependable, the kind of guy you can rely on. But lately, he's been consumed with his job. He works long hours, leaving me alone in the house for days at a time. And honestly, I've gotten used to the solitude. At first, I told myself I was fine with it. I didn't want to seem needy. But as the months passed, it started to feel suffocating. The silence between us grew louder, and I began to feel invisible. I'd spent countless hours in this house, wandering around, trying to fill the emptiness. I would walk the dog, Sparky, a small, energetic terrier who loved to chase after balls. And every time I played with him, I felt a little less alone. Sparky was my constant companion, always there when I needed a distraction, a little bit of joy. But I knew something was missing in my life. I didn't want to admit it, but the loneliness was eating at me. One day, as I sat on the couch, scrolling through my phone, Sparky bounded over to me, his toy in his mouth, tail wagging furiously. I smiled, leaning down to play with him. We had our usual routine: tug-of-war, fetch, and simple games. But today, I felt different. More alive than I had in a long time. I don't know if it was the frustration with Jake's absence or just the loneliness I had been hiding, but suddenly, I found myself more focused on Sparky than ever before. I pulled on the rope toy harder than usual, watching Sparky struggle to get it from me. There was something in the way he fought back, his little body straining against the tug. It wasn't just a game anymore. The intensity, the connection, it was something I had been craving for a long time. As I looked into Sparky's big, trusting eyes, I felt a sense of power, like I was in control of something for once. The way he looked at me, desperate for the toy, made me feel needed in a way that Jake hadn't in months. It was thrilling. I didn't realize it at first, but I started to lean into the moment, allowing myself to get swept up in it. Sparky tugged at the toy again, and I pulled harder, almost playfully taunting him. But then, as I crouched down, something shifted inside me. The game wasn't just a game anymore. There was something deeper behind the playful tugging. Something that made my heart race. I felt alive. It wasn't long before I found myself on the floor, Sparky still tugging at the rope, but now my body was pressed against his, my hands on his fur, pulling him closer. I can't explain what happened next. It was like a switch flipped in my mind. I wasn't just playing with Sparky anymore. I was feeling things I hadn't let myself feel in a long time. Just as I was about to pull Sparky closer to continue the game, I heard the door creak open. I froze. The door opened fully, and I turned to find Ray, Jake's father, standing there in the doorway. His expression was unreadable. His eyes went from me to Sparky, and then back to me. My heart stopped in my chest, and I felt my body go cold. Ray was a tall, quiet man in his late 60s, and he had been living with us since his wife passed away. He wasn't a bad guy, just a little distant, a little too observant. And now he was standing there, watching me in this moment of complete vulnerability. I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. I could only stare at him, my mind racing. What had he seen? What did he know? Ray didn't say anything at first. He didn't shout. He didn't accuse me. He just stood there, looking at me with a gaze that made me feel like he could see right through me. After what felt like an eternity, Ray finally spoke, his voice calm, but with an edge I hadn't heard before. Emily. I didn't expect to find this. I opened my mouth to explain, but nothing came out. What could I say? What was there to say? Ray stepped into the room slowly, his eyes never leaving me. "You know, I understand more than you think," he said quietly. "I know what it feels like to be isolated. But you have to be careful, Emily. You don't want to make a mistake you can't take back." His words hit me like a ton of bricks. What was he implying? Did he know more than he was letting on? Was he watching me? Had he been aware of the way I'd been feeling? Ray didn't say much else. He just turned, walked out of the room, and left me there, stunned, in complete silence. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to process what had just happened. For a moment, I sat on the floor, trying to catch my breath. Sparky was still at my feet, wagging his tail like nothing had happened. But I knew everything had changed. The games I played with him, the way I used to distract myself from the loneliness, it had all been twisted into something darker. Something I couldn't undo. I didn't know what Ray thought of me, or what he would do next. But I knew this. Things weren't going to stay the same. The silence between me and Jake was no longer just about distance. It was about what I had let happen in that room. I didn't know where this would lead, but I had a feeling I was about to find out. I couldn't breathe. I sat there, still frozen in place, as Ray's words echoed in my head. "You don't want to make a mistake you can't take back." His voice, calm and steady, had sent chills down my spine. I wanted to deny it, to tell myself it was nothing. But deep down, I knew Ray had seen more than just a simple game. He knew what was going on, what I had let happen. Ray had left the room, and for the next few hours, I sat there in silence, the weight of what had just happened crushing me. I wanted to go to Jake, to explain everything, but I didn't know how. How could I explain this to him? How could I explain what I had let myself do? The clock ticked on, each minute feeling like a lifetime. The sound of the front door opening snapped me out of my thoughts. It was Jake. My heart jumped into my throat as I stood up, trying to act normal, but I felt the panic rising inside me. Jake walked into the living room, his usual tired smile fading when he saw me standing there, not moving, just staring at him. I could see the confusion in his eyes. "Emily? What's wrong? Why do you look like you've seen a ghost?" I wanted to say something, anything, but the words wouldn't come. My throat was dry, and all I could think about was what Ray had said. I didn't know if I could keep this from Jake anymore. I didn't know if I wanted to. Jake set down his bag and walked toward me, his brow furrowed in concern. "What happened?" I swallowed hard, trying to steady my breath. I need to talk to you." He paused, his hand resting on my shoulder. His touch was gentle, familiar. But I could feel the distance between us growing with every passing second. "Talk to me about what?" I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. The silence between us felt suffocating. I needed to say something, but the words stuck in my throat. Suddenly, I heard a soft knock at the door. The sound broke the silence, and I jumped. I looked at Jake, but he was already walking toward the door, his hand on the knob. I could feel my pulse racing. I didn't want Ray to come back. I didn't want Jake to find out like this. But as soon as the door opened, I froze. It was Ray. Again. I felt my heart stop. I didn't know what to say, how to explain. Jake turned back to me, confused and now visibly annoyed. "Ray? What are you doing here?" Ray didn't speak at first. He just stepped inside, his eyes scanning the room, moving from Jake to me, then back to Jake. He didn't look angry, just disappointed. His presence in the room felt heavy, like he knew something no one else did. "I'm just here to make sure Emily's okay," Ray said, his voice calm, almost too calm. I could feel Jake's tension building. He looked between Ray and me, his eyes narrowing. "Okay, what's going on, Dad? You're acting like I'm missing something." Ray didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked past Jake and sat down on the couch. His movements were slow, deliberate. There was a calmness about him that made everything feel even worse. Jake turned back to me, his gaze now sharp. "Emily, what's going on? Why is he here?" I wanted to scream, to tell him the truth. But I couldn't. I didn't know how to say it, how to explain what had happened, what I had done. Ray finally broke the silence, his voice calm, but carrying an underlying weight. "Jake, there's something you need to know about your wife." My blood ran cold. I could see Jake's confusion shift to something else, anger. He wasn't sure if he should be angry at Ray or at me. "What about her?" Jake asked, his voice tight. Ray's gaze never left me as he spoke, his words slow and deliberate. "Emily's been playing games with Sparky. You know, her way of dealing with things." Jake's eyes snapped to mine, and I felt my stomach drop. The way Ray said it, the way he knew, it was too much. I could feel my world crumbling around me. "What the hell are you talking about?" Jake's voice cracked as he stared at me, disbelief written all over his face. Ray looked at Jake, his voice softer now, but no less firm. "She's been seeking attention in ways that aren't healthy. You're not here, Jake. You haven't been here for months. She's been alone. And now, she's been caught up in something, more than just playing." Jake's eyes went wide, and I could see the anger building in him. The hurt. But it wasn't just at Ray, it was at me. And that hurt more than anything else. You've been doing this?" Jake asked, his voice trembling with disbelief. I didn't know what to say. How could I explain what I'd done? How could I take back the hurt I'd caused? "I didn't mean for it to go this far," I whispered. "I never meant for anyone to find out." I just felt so lost. Ray's eyes softened for a moment, but his words didn't. "You've made your choices, Emily. And now, you'll have to live with them." Jake turned to Ray, his face a mix of anger and pain. "You should have told me earlier. I deserve to know." Ray didn't flinch. "You've been blind, son. But now you see. You're just as much to blame." With that, Jake turned to me, his eyes filled with fury and sadness. "I can't do this anymore. I can't stay in this house with you. Not after this." The words hit me like a slap in the face. I wanted to apologize, to beg him to stay, but I couldn't. I couldn't fix this. I had crossed a line, and there was no going back. Jake walked out the door without another word. And as the sound of his car pulling away faded into the distance, I was left standing there with Ray, who had just torn my life apart.